Hi, everybody. Welcome to New Answers Podcast. I'm Gwen Flynn, and I'm here with my friend Tiffany Lee. We're a community of everyday people sharing solutions to life challenges based on basically our personal experiences. And we're continuing our conversation on spirituality as a means of finding solutions to life challenges. We're thinking making that connection to the whatever you want to call it, the divine invisible, the higher power, will guide us to God centered solutions to life challenges. And if you've been following us from, I don't know, however long we've been talking about this, we basically have been talking about ways in which spirituality um, makes itself known to us. I think we talked about out of body experiences, we talked about deja vu, and a number of other topics. And so today, our conversation is going to be maybe a little bit different because we want to talk about this film that we both saw called Conclave. And the film, for those of you who haven't seen it, is is as the name implies. So it's about the convening. It's centered around Catholicism and the Catholic Church, and the conclave that is convened to identify a new pope. So in the story, the pope, the original, has died, and now the cardinals have to come together and identify and elect a new pope. So it's a little different from our spirituality conversation because we're talking about a religious denomination. But, and the reason we want to talk about it is because of the twist that happens in this story that I know I find interesting. I think Tiffany does too. Let me just say at the outset that neither Tiffany or I are gaining any finance, that we have no financial interest in this film. We are just talking about it from the standpoint of what's been presented in the film, in that story, from the writer or the director's point of view. And it's fiction, even though it has some connection, I mean, it seems to have some connection to reality because of circumstances that have happened in real life. The Pope did die, and that the cardinals did come together and elected a new pope. And I don't know that it's necessarily a coincidence, but because I don't know that coincidences, I think coincidences are more than coincidences. I think things happen for a reason. Anyway, all of that said, and for those of you who haven't seen the film and you don't want to know how it ends, you may want to cover your ears for a little bit. But hopefully we can talk about it in a way that doesn't give away too much of the ending, but it may pique your curiosity. So, with all of that preamble,
that was a preamble.
that was a big preamble. Let's have this conversation. How do you want to start this, Tiffany? What do you think?
Well, I will let you start it because this was definitely something that you're very excited about, that you got me to watch. How it relates with our spirituality talks, I think is very interesting as well, because that goes maybe down a different road, but
Yeah.
it definitely shows um the movie is about, and I think we can talk about it without giving away the big secret, but the
Okay.
movie is about, religion and humanity, right? Our
Yes.
level of, and spirituality, our levels of how it all intertwines. As spirituals we want to be, ego gets involved, and in these um hierarchies in the Catholic Church or probably any religion, like there is the element of ego and then humility and spirit. And they did such a great job of showing the conflict within each of them, right?
Yes.
I thought that was really interesting. And the reason why this really came up with us is because it just, you know, the new pope and the other pope died, the new pope, they had their conclave and the new pope was chosen and it's a controversial pope. It's a great, So it's just, yeah, life imitates, like art imitates life,
Art
and
imitates life.
sometimes art predicts life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it could very well predict life, which is another interesting point of view. So there were three things that stood out for me that I wanted to explore, the two of us explore in our conversation.
Okay.
And the three things, one of them is, and they're all kind of interrelated.
Uh-huh.
Um, and this is all again based on a story. And this, Conclave is a movie. It's somebody's imagination. It's fiction. It's not real life. Even though, like we were saying, life imitates or art imitates life, or life imitates art. But anyway, one of the three things is God makes no mistakes. I mean, in life, and those of us who believe in a higher power, whatever we want to call that higher power, I think we all can agree that whatever we call that higher power, some people call it God, I call it the universe sometimes, I call it, divine spirit, the omnipresent, it makes no mistakes. I think we can share in that belief. And
Right.
so that's part of what came up for me in viewing this film. The other thing is, and maybe this is too revelatory in terms of the twist. But anyway, um, gender. Does gender matter in church leadership? So that's another thing that came up for me.
Hmm.
And then the third thing is just to, again, these are kind of interrelated. The suggestion that there's a rise in feminine energy.
Hmm.
Those are the three things that came up for me in viewing
Okay.
this film. I don't know if you had a similar experience.
Yes, especially once you get to the end, right? Um, and it's all three of those things are extremely um pertinent to the times now with feminine energy,
I,
you know.
yeah,
Yeah. And the wisdom in feminine energy, So let's start with the role of the female in the church.
yes,
I mean, we could say let's start with that. That can be a whole series of talks on its own,
absolutely.
because they there came a like I can't say historically when it happened, when they, but definitely during the process of writing the Bible, even during, I think, Christ times when he was walking on the planet. Now I've heard so many different stories about the relationship with him and Mary. Um, and that because even at that time it was so patriarchal that
Yeah,
they couldn't give Mary credit for who she really was.
yeah,
So they made her a prostitute. And there's a lot of information out there that says that's just not the case. She came as she was like went through one of the goddess schools. There's all kinds of theories. So, and also was a teacher and was very well respected by Christ. And that's why she has her own gospel, and it's more spiritual, more personal. Her relationship with Christ was more personal. So, and then you have Paul, that in there's a controversy where some people say Paul and Jesus' gospels are different. And the church chose to follow Paul's gospel. So they say we're following Christ, but
Yeah.
if you really do the research, we're following, the church follows Paul. There's a couple pastors that go out and say that. And I think that's also why I had conflict with the church as a young girl, because
Mhm.
I used to read Jesus' words all the time.
Mhm.
And I felt that um, I would question things that the church did. Cause I'd be like, "Oh, we don't really have to do this because Jesus says,
Mhm.
we can go directly to God. We don't have to pray to anyone else. We can get our answers directly through or, confess and stuff like that. And um, so getting to the role of the women in the church, Paul says that women can't be leaders, that they have to submit to men and they can't be leaders in the church. Men are not supposed to
Oh.
be led by women. And that's why they only had, until recently, men priests and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And a lot of Baptist churches are the same. I mean, there's a lot of churches that believe that. And that's how they run their churches, a lot of denominations. I always thought it was interesting because I was like, but in the Bible, God always sent angels directly to women to like
Mhm.
give important information, like the coming of Jesus, you know what I mean? Or um I'm spacing at the moment, but if you really think about it, the role of women in the Bible is very, very strong and
Yeah.
are of leadership. But then when we come to religions, like all of a sudden we're not
Yeah.
supposed to
They have a back seat.
consider. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so see, so that's where you and I differ in terms of knowledge of the Bible. I'm not as knowledgeable about the Bible and the difference between what Christ has presented and what Paul presents. I didn't know that. And the other thing I should say, I think I've said this in previous talks that we've had, that I am of the belief that we don't really need inner. I consider, in the church, the way they have this hierarchical, the religions, I guess, this is why I
right,
distinguish myself from being religious and being spiritual. In those churches, they have this hierarchical way of being. So it's all of these people, the deacons, the bishops, the pastor, and depending on the denomination you're in, the whatever, the cardinal, the bishop or whatever, all of these intermediaries before you get to the God presence, the deity. And I don't think that they're necessary. I think that's why I keep saying we can have a direct connection. We don't have to have these intermediaries interpreting things for us. So,
right,
so that's where I come from. And again, I'm not as familiar with what's contained in the Bible as from Christ's point of view or as from Paul's point of view. So, but I find what was presented in this film, I mean, just very interesting about the gender and the roles and in that. Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
So even like the scene where, they show the nuns and they're kind of in the background, they're kind of there to accommodate and make comfortable. And then they had the head nun
yeah.
um, speak at that one point when um, the priest was questioning um, who, the priest was questioning the motive of one of the cardinals, right? About
Right.
um, basically sabotaging another cardinal's chance of becoming pope.
Right.
So that was interesting because that's
was.
that's a dynamic that
Yeah,
where the human element to people came into play.
absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, it really pointed up the imperfections of us as humans,
you
doesn't it?
know,
Because, like you said, there was a
it does.
lot of ego came up,
Yeah.
in that. Because, yeah, it played out in such ways so that, in so many ways, there was the sabotage, there was, um, I guess it's still considered sabotage when this nun was brought forward, um, because that nun had a relationship with one of the cardinals that was being considered for
Hmm.
the position of pope, and it was to kind of, you know put a besmirk, I guess, the is that the word, the reputation of that cardinal, in order for that person to be disqualified, I guess, from being a candidate. So again, all those human frailties that came forward was very interesting.
So the other thing that comes up is, and this comes up now, I mean, like, as far as leadership roles in the church or in the government, you
Hmm.
know, being that we're all human and prone to make mistakes, in science of mind, they say when you are separate from source, God, you're either in alignment or you're in mistake. You're in mistake mode. You're in ego and you make mistakes there.
Yeah.
What level of humanness, I guess you would call it, or ego, should be allowed in someone being in that role? Like, what's how the Bible says you forgive 7 times 7 over, you know what I mean? But who do
Right.
you follow? Like, it's
Yeah.
not that we don't have to follow a leader, right?
Yeah.
Um, God preferred in the Old Testament, before they got kings and leaders and stuff, people were just supposed to go directly to God, but they begged for a king, and God didn't want to give one, but He said, "Fine." He's like, "This, I'm giving you this because it's what you asked for, but let me tell you what will happen. They will enslave you. They will take your money. They will, like, all the sins that
Yes.
humans do." Right? He warned the people, but they're like, "That's what we want." So He assigned their first kings, then, and they've had them ever since. And yes, they've done all these things. Um, so when I was in the church, in Catholic church, I remember telling the priests that Jesus says you don't have to follow, you
Mhm.
don't have to follow a leader, that you can go directly to him. When they were asking me to confess my sins for our first communion, I was like, no, and I was a little girl, I was like 10. And so I was like, no, I just Jesus, you know what I mean? They're like,
So you rejected that notion.
yeah. So
And
I've never
okay.
confessed. I've never
Uh-huh.
done it. Um, and almost I remember reading the Bible because I read the Bible multiple times, and you can go from Old Testament to New Testament. The thing that stood out with me is God saying, "I don't like religions." Like, He always said, I feel like almost in every chapter in the Bible, at some point He says, "This is why I don't like religion. Religion separates me from my people."
Oh,
Right?
okay.
And that happens but it's because people are humanists, likes to not have the responsibility of
Uh,
self and our own choices. So therefore we like to have someone that's supposed to control our good actions and someone to blame our negative actions. So therefore we have a God and a devil, right? As opposed to being fully accountable and going directly to God and having to face Him source all the time for everything
yeah.
in our life, all our choices, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and when we go into mistake or an ego, we have to be self-corrected
Yeah.
and or core suggested, what I called it, core suggested, you know, but you have to take accountability to the fact that you're
Yes,
over here or you're in this mess of a life at some point because you probably weren't following and you weren't in union with God, you know.
right.
And yeah, God doesn't make mistakes.
That's where that duality stuff comes from, right?
Hmm.
And in the mind of the universe, the omnipresent, there is no duality, right? That
Right.
we're all one. It's yeah. What?
In the least in the studies, at least of what we both are kind of studying the same when it comes to Christian Science and agape, it's the same. And that's the belief there is that source, God is one source, the back of all source, the prime creator. And it does make sense where there can't be a duality because he would cancel out himself. So
Yeah,
the duality comes within the creation, like within us. We kind of create the duality.
yeah. We are the ones that create the duality. Yeah, yeah. And that's where we get into trouble. We
Yeah.
face all these challenges. You
Yeah.
know, this is how these challenges come up in our lives.
Right.
We're out of alignment. We're out of the connection. We
Right.
have disconnected ourselves. And to me, that creates the hell on earth.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's no place down below that's all fire and brimstone. We can have it right here. When we,
We've gone through so many hells on earth. We have
yeah,
Hitler. I mean, just so many, just over and over. We just keep cycling through
mhm,
these, leaders that create hell for people. I mean, can you imagine being in a prison camp? Can you imagine the poor people? I don't know if we should go here, but the poor people being put in prison camps right now, which I haven't seen much on the news lately.
I
I think
know.
I think the courts made them pause on doing that, but they definitely haven't brought anyone back.
Right. No, they not that I've heard. And,
Yeah,
and I have limited my news. I am watching news now more than I did even a month ago. But I
right.
heard any of that, like people have been released or whatever, or given their due process.
They're
Uh,
not even given due process. Yeah, it's
yeah. Um, and so yeah. And then this so we talked about a lot of different things.
yeah. We jumped.
I
We're
know.
back to conclave now.
But it's all connected,
Yeah,
we just kind of skip around and but I think we're still on that talk about like gender in the hierarchy and having these intermediaries and so for me it was like I told you what came up was does gender really matter in church leadership? It really shouldn't, especially the twist that happens makes you think that no, gender doesn't matter. And so it shouldn't even be an issue. You know,
right. It shouldn't be, but for men, right? Like men have decided that it matters. Because they didn't, and that's why the witch trials came up because
oh yes.
spiritually women are more connected
Yeah.
in the feminine. The feminine is more mysterious, more mystical, and more connected. And when a woman's more connected, easier. Men obviously can get there when they are balanced in their masculine and feminine. Um,
Yeah.
but because women have a tendency to be more connected, that's what intimidated the men back in the days and why they started calling them witches or whatnot because of the gifts of the spirit, gifts to heal, gifts to communicate, and
Yeah.
that showed power in women that the men at the time didn't want to allow.
Exactly. And they started burning women at the stake, right? I mean, there was what was it? The Salem
Salem witch trials, and there's
trial.
been multiple. I'm learning that there's been multiple times that this has happened. So,
Mm.
um, not that it's not happening now. Did you hear about the lady that had a miscarriage in Texas and they put her in jail for 5 months until
No,
she could prove that she had a natural miscarriage than do something to cause baby.
no, I don't think I have. I mean, some of that sounds familiar. Uh,
Right.
so maybe I did hear like bits and pieces of it. Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Yeah, because they're only telling bits and pieces of it. It's like you'd have to hear about it from influencers on TikTok or whatever that are talking about it. But the news is definitely not showing a lot of information, I've noticed.
that's really frightening to me. And
It
this,
is frightening.
you know, because it's that what is it? The fourth state, whatever the term was. The news is what is available to us in a democracy to hold
Hmm.
those folks in position of leadership accountable. If
Right.
they are afraid, as I think they are, and being intimidated by a authoritarian leader, that's not good for anybody. It,
Right. Yeah, they're definitely intimidated. I mean, he's forced quite a few people out of their jobs, but at least they are still speaking up online. And
yeah,
that's where we have to get our news from at the moment. It's just through YouTube, through TikTok, through their channels that are their own online, which is the beautiful part about this era. Like they didn't have this back. They didn't have the internet back in um during Hitler time. You know what I mean? It's so they had a lot less access to like what was really happening. Like
true.
we have access as much
Hmm.
as they like to squash it, but
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point to make. That we do have, other outlets that we can get information from. Whereas at different times in history, when you know these kind of leaders surface, they didn't have that. They didn't have that ability. They didn't have that.
yeah.
Yes. So.
So speaking of the Pope and these type of leaders, like so the new Pope coming from America
Uh huh.
and being what one would consider more liberal, which it would be more Christian anyway. Like Christ was definitely would be considered liberal.
Right.
And but the traditional Catholic, the the conservative Catholics, um, well, the last two popes, I mean, this pope and the last one was liberal too.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that people were already surprised with him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this new pope, I think, really send a message to California. I mean, to America, not California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think so too. I yeah. I think so too. This is why this what we talked about at the top of this recording. Um, art imitating life and life imitating art. You know, it seems like life is imitating art in the way in which that the film Conclave sort of ends up, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and looking at the choices that were made in life as to who the new pope would be.
No. And
Yeah.
the interesting thing about the movie, it shows you like because conclave, so that we're not confusing anyone, is really what happens when they all go in and they lock themselves separate from the world, where they can't even know what's going on. The only reason why they did in the movie is because that bomb happened, right? And then they were like, okay, what's happening out there? But
Right.
they're supposed to shut off and all be in union and prayer with God to choose their pope. And I thought that, man, it's just like, don't you? I wish I was a fly on the wall when they chose a pope from Chicago.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
that was such a huge step.
I
in
think
our
so.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't even think those who were covering it, of course, these, like I said, some of these news outlets have been sort of compromised, but I don't think any of them predicted, because like there was a list of 10 names that would come up
Hmm.
as who the prospective candidates would be. I don't think the one they chose was on that list. I don't,
Interesting.
I mean, I may be wrong. I may be wrong because I may have missed something,
Right.
but yeah, definitely. And so it would have been fascinating to be a fly on the wall to find out what the conversations were like, what is the criteria that they were looking at. Some of it was obvious. I mean, like some of the candidates in the film that were being considered or at least lobbying for the position
Hmm.
are obviously into their ego, you know, and certainly probably disqualified themselves because of that.
Right. Which is good. I mean, it's
Mhm.
if you think about it, like I read energies, and so the new pope, like his energy to me is beautiful, actually. It's
Yeah,
made me want to actually follow him, you know what I mean? And just kind of
yeah,
what does he say? And you know, uh,
yeah. What does he
really
think?
feels it really feels Christ-like. He really has a beautiful, safe, for me, it feels safe energy. And it's just to me just really interesting that the Catholic Church chose this and chose to go down this route. It's continuing this route because the last pope was controversial when I mean I guess the church was already split in multi facets of like conservative, liberal, and like three, whatever, and they went this route, and it was
Yeah,
controversial when the last one was chosen, but they're continuing it. So it's just to me, it feels good. It
yeah,
feels safe because the
yeah,
church still has so much power and respect that for them to make this stance and against Trump and um against treating people bad. You know what I mean? Like he's a very liberal pope.
yeah. Yeah. So, looking at the world, I mean, not only, the leadership in America, but look at the leadership around the world, in that this Pope seems to be and the antithesis of that, of what
Right.
this authoritarian way of being, this Pope seems to be opposite of that, you know, and really wanting people to be, the leaders to be more empathetic of those who have been disenfranchised or marginalized or whatever, for history, throughout history.
Right.
So yeah, I think it is an interesting choice that they make. I mean, even though I'm one who, don't I think we don't need an intermediary, but if they're going to choose one, that this was a good choice considering what's going on in the world. And to me, um, this pope seems to be not shy away from. I guess I shouldn't attach a gender to it, but he seems to have a softer side, and like you were saying, safe. You feel safe with him, and
Yeah.
and so I interpret that softer side to be, and it is not like, so it's, I say soft, but um, I don't mean that uh, he will necessarily be, you know, easily swayed necessarily. I mean, like, I think he has firm principles that he will stand beside and fight for if it comes to that. I don't know in what form that would take, but and to me that is, I would attribute those characteristics to feminine, the
Okay.
feminine kid.
Yes.
Me?
So what you're doing, Glenn, right now is you're reading his energy. 'Cause-
Oh,
So yes,
okay.
and it is you can read when reading energies like the masculine, feminine energy, and we all have it within us in balance. And his does feel balanced with a little bit more feminine wisdom in it. Yeah,
Yes.
no. So
That's
yeah, that's where you're seeing the softer side. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's exactly good. Thank you for articulating that in a better way than I could, because that's exactly what I feel. Yeah, that comes from him. He's emanating that kind of energy.
Yeah.
And so that's where there's some uh, connection to the art of that movie. You know,
Yeah.
seen
No.
didn't it?
Yeah.
Like that, it was sort of elevating the feminine side, the feminine attributes. That, like you say, we're equipped with both masculine and feminine energy. All of us,
Right.
no what gender. But sometimes, depending on the circumstances, we get the uh, the dominant energy could be one or the other, depending on what the circumstances is.
Yeah.
And at this time in history, it seems that the feminine is becoming more dominant. That feminine
The
energy,
feminine is rising. We don't want to say
right?
dominant.
Oh,
Dominance is a masculine
it's rising.
term, but the feminine's rising
Yeah,
back to a more equal position. At least that's the goal. I mean,
yeah,
there's definitely in the realm of it the masculine holding tight, which is what's happening really here in America, right? The masculine holding
yeah,
tight to its control, and that's why they're trying to take away rights of women.
yes. In
So
all aspects of our life. Yeah, exactly. Our
yeah,
reproductive, rights, you know, even voting.
voting rights,
Yeah, yeah,
right to like they are trying to go backwards so
absolutely.
strong. Like, come on, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, because they're feeling threatened, and again, it's that disconnection that they have. It's, there's no need to feel threatened at all. Um, but yeah, I think that's exactly what we're experiencing in this time in our history. Um, so the rise in the feminine energy
Yeah.
is there. So
So
yeah, and again, I want to say, we're talking about conclave and making parallels to what's happening in real life. Um, but neither Tiffany or I have any financial interests in that film. It's just that it was just like any art that you experience, like even a painting, right? You're trying to figure out, you're trying to sort of interpret what is the artist trying to convey with this, right? And that's what this conversation is about. I mean, we could have been talking about, some sort of painting, but we're not. We're talking about the art form that we're talking about is this film, and how it has parallels to what we're experiencing today, in real life, and how we can draw some parallels to that, um, and sort of interpret what the writer, and I don't remember who the writer is and the director, because those are the ones that have the say over what the outcome of that story is supposed to be, right? So, but I'm surprised I haven't heard a whole lot of conversation. Like you just in general, people who have seen the film, they haven't talked about it in the way that we're talking about it. That I know of.
no, well, I don't know. What happened was you brought it up, and then I saw a couple people talking about it on YouTube,
Oh,
but I
did you?
didn't listen because I was like, no, I have to see it because I knew there was a catch at the end. And so I think someone else said the same thing we did too. Like, if you haven't seen it yet, don't watch this because I'm going to give give the information. I feel like we were able to talk about it without giving the twist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there has been some. Now I actually want to go back and find
Oh,
and listen to see what they'll say.
I'll have to
Because
go, I'll have to look for what people are saying, if they're saying anything online. I haven't seen it online because I haven't been looking, but even
yeah,
in real life, some of the friends of mine who've seen it, they kind of critiqued it for production value, I guess.
uh-huh.
Didn't get into like whatever message, whatever their takeaway was from that outside of the performances and the look of it, other than that. I want to hear, I mean, did anything else resonate with them? And I haven't heard that.
Interesting. Well, I wonder if people got it. I wonder, I knew
It,
that, yeah, that's what I'm wondering if some people, if it went over their head.
yeah, it
You
could
know what
be.
I mean?
It
Because
could be.
maybe it's depending on how educated you are in biology or whatnot. Because
Yeah.
actually, I'm actually surprised that I haven't seen a traditionally, I feel like the church would have been against the movie, and I haven't seen anything about that.
Oh, that's
Like
right.
yeah, like traditionally, if something comes out that shows the church in a negative, and I'm not saying that it doesn't really show it in a negative, but if it comes out with something controversial that they would say goes against what they believe is
Yes.
the religion belief in their God,
Yeah.
then they kind of come out with don't watch that or this that. I haven't seen any of that.
I know I didn't even think of that because yeah, that's exactly what the church would do, especially this church, the Catholic Church. Woo,
Yeah,
quick. But
right.
I haven't seen that. You're
I
right.
haven't seen that either.
That's fascinating.
That is
You see,
fascinating.
that's fascinating. Oh my, it's
Yes.
really fascinating. So, so, so for those of you who are listening to this conversation, what are your thoughts? I mean, if you've seen it, what are your thoughts about this? What takeaway do you have from it? Did any of what we talked about sound like something that you felt, or does it resonate with you at all? Um, and I think now it's streaming, so it's not like, well, I guess
It's
streaming
on
is.
Prime. I watched it on Prime.
Oh, you watched it on Prime? Okay. So maybe people can get it without having to go into theaters anymore. But um, and again,
And there's another movie called The Conclave, and this one's called
oh
Conclave, just so that you don't get confused. I didn't watch The Conclave. I think I will though.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, that's right. So the titles could, because there are several
yeah.
movies, those similar titles that could get confusing. But yeah, so I'd be curious to hear from any of you that are hearing this, what your thoughts are of it if you've seen it. And again, we're not benefiting from this at all in a financial way. So if you want to see it, go ahead and see it. If not, you don't have to. But I'm just curious if you have seen it, what your thoughts are about it, and about anything else that you've heard us talk about. If you've had some conversation with anybody about this, it would be interesting to hear from you. Write your comments in the space below this video, and please subscribe because we are making recordings and making them available to folks. Trying to do it on a weekly basis, but maybe it's every other week and on a Friday. And if you subscribe, you will get a notification when we've uploaded a new recording. But we'd love to hear from you and maybe even invite you on to talk with us about some of your experiences as it relates to nurturing our spirituality. So I think that's it for now. What do you think? Do you have any last thoughts you want to share, Tiffany?
No, I think we started to touch on it, but we can go on it. I want to talk about it on another issue, like does God make mistakes? Because I think that's really interesting.
Okay, yeah, that's a fascinating conversation. I would love to have that conversation. Okay,
Yeah.
and
And
that's
if you don't mind, I have a new website for my readings. Like I did decide to put out a website called bluemoongoddess.net. Bluemoongoddess.net if you want to um by a tarot reading or energy reading. And I do a lot on relationships and stuff like that. And
bloominggoddess.net.
bluemoongoddess.net.
So BLOOMING .net, goddess.net, or
No,
bloom in.
blue like the color, BLUEMOON.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, check it out. I'll take a look too.
All right.
All right. Until next time, we'll see you next time.
All right. My dog's saying bye.
Bye.
Bye.